can they say we are finished? We have just begun. Are lyrics from popular musician T.Y. Bello's The Future. But as Nigeria turns 58 on October 1, 2018, and we go down memory lane looking at our checkered history, there are some times when we do agree with those lyrics that indeed as a nation, we are finished. As we get ready to go to the polls come February 2019, what does the future really hold for us? As young people, do we really stand a chance? Are we really the leaders of tomorrow? My name is Isabella Akinseye, and I believe politics is not just for the old and the grey. It's for the young, the new, it's for you. Welcome to a brand new season of Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
Politico Politica with Isabella Akinseye.
Today on Politico Politica, we look at the future of Nigeria even as we go down memory lane as Nigeria turns 58 on October 1, 2018. Our very first guest of the season will be sharing his big plans should he be voted into power as the #1 citizen of Nigeria. His bio reads like the stuff of conference brochures, of which he has spoken at several. He has done business, he's taught, and he has won awards. Though he was born and raised in Nigeria, he has spent the last 16 years living in the United States. He studied biomedical engineering at City College of New York, executive leadership and management at Cornell University, took MBA courses at Wharton Business School, and studied venture capital and investment at Stanford University. He is the founder of Startup 52 and co-founder of Real Life Inc. He's seeking to be the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. A strong believer in the power of education, of technology, and entrepreneurship. Our very first guest of the season, you can say, deserves a lot of accolades for someone who is only 35 years old. His name is Chike Ukaegbu. Chike, welcome to Politico Politica.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, before we go into why you want to hold the #1 position in the land, let's spend some time discussing the topic at hand. Nigeria at 58. Clearly, you're not as old as the country. But in your honest opinion, how will you assess our progress as a nation?
I say this, our democracy is very fragile. It's very young as well, compared to most of the developed nations that we look up to. Nigeria is barely 58, as you mentioned. When we look at nations like the United States, who have been there for over 200 years and have spent time working on their democracy, it actually gives me hope that, if we start now, to change the course of our nation, of our future, that there's a lot in store for Nigeria. Yeah.
I like how you touch on democracy because I have that down as one of my questions. But let's look at leadership in the country, the vacillation between democratic and military rule. What do you make of the men and the women who have been at the helm of affairs of Nigeria?
So I usually say this, and if you know what our tagline is, Amazing Nigerian, that's because we believe that every Nigerian has some goodness in them. However, when you look at our crop of leaders, we tend to call them corrupt, we call them evil, and several names, right? But the truth is, their perspective of leadership is one that stems from colonialism, right? Because that's the only perspective that they had, right? And the problem with that is, when you look at colonialism, right, you have a colonial master and servants, right, or peasants. The goal of the master is to make sure that everything good revolves around him. So the peasants are only provided for enough to make sure that the master is comfortable. Now, because that's the flawed perspective that our leaders have today, that has affected the way that they have run the nation for the last 58 years, right? So you have people who place self-interest and tribal interests before the nation, thereby a nation rich in resources and human capital with 200 million people and almost half of the population lives in abject poverty. So you start to see the consequences of having wrong leadership by the way the people are living.
Chike, I like how you touch on democracy, because that leads to my next question. How do you rate our democracy as a nation?
On a good day, I would have said very poor. But I would give that additional points because, like I said, 58 years is not sufficient time to build out, in my opinion, a solid democracy that works for um, um, diverse people, right? However, though, I think we should learn from best practices from other nations. And the fact that we still have leaders that tend to learn the negatives better than the positives is why is that poor. So we could be doing a lot better than we're doing. But considering that we're still young, there's still a lot of trial and error that I believe we're going through right now that would help us to build the base that we need.
So basically, we should learn from the mistakes and there's no need repeating it. So if it took the US 200 years, it shouldn't take Nigeria 200 years. We
Exactly.
should lead from.
Right.
Okay. Do you think Nigeria deserves the term the giant of Africa?
I believe so, yes. I mean, we're first among the nations in Africa.
In what areas, though?
Population-wise. I believe when it comes to hustle and grit, Nigerians own that, not just in Africa, but
that side hustle,
globally.
The entrepreneurial
Yes,
spirit.
that spirit's there, the resilient spirit. I tell people, if you look at with all of the negative things, with all of the conditions we find ourselves in, we're still the largest economy in Africa. We're still the 26th largest economy in the world. There aren't too many nations that can boast of that if they were where we are. The nation with the largest population of people who live in extreme poverty, producing the largest economy in Africa. So there's that resilient spirit that I think is unique to the Nigerian that many other people don't have.
So my final question on the topic of the day, Nigeria will be 58 on the 1st of October 2018. What can we expect in the next 58 years?
That's a great question. I think a question that should be posed to our current leaders, partly because a good crop of them will not be here in 50 years, in 58 years. If you ask me what I believe the nation will look like in the next 58 years, I have a lot of hope. I believe that Nigeria will rise to be that #1 nation as long as her young people today understand the importance of not mortgaging their futures for the selfish gain of those who don't understand the future, right? Those who will not be here when we are.
We hope your legacy will live on.
Oh, definitely.
Now over to you, our viewers. How will you rate Nigeria at 58? Do go online and engage with us across our social media platforms. Use the hashtag Politico Politica. We want to hear from you. When we return on Politico Politica, Chike will be sharing his journey into politics and so much more. Stick around. You're still tuned in to Politico Politica, and you're with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye, and our guest today, Chike Ukaegbu, who is a presidential aspirant in the 2019 general elections. Before the break, we discussed Nigeria at 58. Now we turn our focus to Chike's journey into politics. This promises to be fair. They say man is a political animal. How would you say your evolution or metamorphosis began? Were you a luta continua, Victoria Asata, or it kind of just grew on you?
I think it sort of grew on me. I'll tell you why. So I didn't wake up one day and decide, oh, someday I'm going to become the president of Nigeria, right? It stemmed from this frustration and anger from looking at, my parents who had not been paid pensions for, at the time, about a year, right? And I just didn't understand how people had given their lives to service. And then in their old age, the nation which they have served could not afford to take care of them. And that, of course, foiled with all the other stuff. You see young people who cannot go to school. You hear constantly of people dying from illnesses that could easily have been solved. We always used to say there's the most dangerous illness in Nigeria is brief illness, right? Because every obituary sign is he died or she died after a brief illness. And you're wondering, what sort of illness is this, right?
So you got tired of just seeing the problems and not enough solutions. So if we go back to secondary school, you're not the head boy, you're not with your siblings trying to be the boss. So it was something that grew over time. Okay, now, politics has been described as a very dirty game in Nigeria. How willing are you to get your hands dirty, to play politics?
Well, so playing dirty politics means trying to play politics the Nigerian way. And if that's the formula, you can be sure that I would lose, in a hair's breadth, right? So before coming out, that was extremely important to us to come up with strategies that are unconventional, strategies that
Strategies like what?
I can't divulge all that now because those are strategies for us. But we believe that as things start to unfold, people will start to appreciate them and see them for what they are. But that was extremely important to us. How do we make sure that we do not play politics the Nigerian way? Because you cannot defeat the status quo playing politics their way. And we came up with, some, in my opinion, brilliant strategies, brilliant ideas on how to do that. And of course, that buffered, the need and our ability to see a roadmap to Asarok come 2019.
Okay. I like how you say politics the Nigerian way, but I think even globally, when you talk politics, you talk money politics, you talk godfathers, godmothers, godparents. So where's the money coming for all of this?
Good question. So the people, I tell people, my godfather is that, Okada man on the street who can contribute 100 naira. It's the student who buys into the vision and the ideology and says, you know what, we're tired of old people trying to mortgage our futures. It's time for us to take it back. So yes, I do not have 10,000 naira, but here's 500 naira that I have to make sure something works in your campaign. It's somebody else saying, oh, I don't have money, but I can do this, and, contributing in kind to making sure it works. Of course, we understand the role and the importance of money, which is why we do talk to potential investors. We make sure that the people who we bring on board are people that do not compromise our message or integrity tomorrow. Because we understand that you cannot come to change the system by being exactly what the system is.
So you don't want to join them. You can beat
not.
them at
Definitely,
the game.
yes.
But still on the issue of godfather, godmothers, who is the person or the people speaking for you behind closed doors who are saying you must be the person, even if they're not putting money down?
It's the everyday person. So it's all of the people who've watched, the interviews and decided, hey, that's a brilliant young man, and that's the vision we want for our nation. People doing things that we don't know about or send us that message. I got a call from a 79-year-old man who said, listen, after I listened to you, I dusted off my PVC, and if whatever I can do, I'm going to do to make sure that, not just me, but my community and my state actually votes for you. So it's all of those, testimonies, I would say, that continue to fuel us, and we're doing something right, yeah.
Okay, so it's the old man, it's the young lady, it's the student. I think President Buhari also employed that. He said he didn't have money and people donated. So I'm sure at some point he'll be asking us to donate a kobo and a naira. But let's look at party politics.
Right.
Yes, party politics. Which of the political parties ideology aligns with your values?
I mean, we all know there are 91 political parties in Nigeria today. Before deciding to pick one, we had about 12 to 15 of them approach us, right? But there were three things that were extremely important to me. One, a party that aligned with our ideology, one that was youth-centric or youth-focused, and one that had the structure, the capacity to, of course, deliver on a 36-state plan. And we found that in, Advanced Allied Party. It's a name many people have never heard before because it was...
Advanced Allied Party.
Yes, AAP. It's a name, I was saying, many people have
so
never heard before.
So have they adopted you as the presidential candidate, or you're going to go to primaries?
There will be primaries. It's a political party. But I'm hoping, I'm believing that I will emerge their candidate.
Well, we wish you good luck that you get the candidacy.
Thank you.
You win our primaries. But let's talk about leadership. They say leadership is about service, and you can't serve if you're not humble. And I think it takes great courage for a leader to learn from their mistakes and to admit failure. So looking back at your failures, what is the greatest lesson you've learned?
So there's something I usually tell my students, and like you said, I actually ended up teaching for about 7 years. I told him, listen, you cannot look at failure as an impediment, right? Failure becomes a stepping stone to something greater, right? It means you have a second opportunity to do better, right? So I have always seen that I don't consider failure a bad thing. I consider it an opportunity to do better than I did previously. So when we talk about what failures have you had, what regrets have you had, I tell people I actually don't have regrets. I learn lessons, right?
So let's take one major failure and one lesson.
The first business I launched was a non-profit. And I learned a huge lesson from running it. And that lesson was this, right? If you have passion and grit and resilience, but you don't have money or resources to match that, you burn out. If you have money and the passion is not there, you actually negatively impact lives sometimes. So the right equation, the right balance is a combination of both. So we went from, okay, it's a non-profit, we can easily get donations and raise money, to understanding that no, we had to be sustainable. We had to come up with brilliant ways to be sustainable, to make sure that we can carry along our passion. And that was a lesson that took me burning out to learn, which now made me understand the importance of having a for-profit. Same mission, same inspiration, same goal. However, I now understood the importance of building wealth and using that to support this passion and, community service-driven nonprofit. So that's one lesson that when people ask me, I tell them that. That's one. Well, I could go on. I could give you.
Well, let's loosen up a bit. On
Sure.
a lighter note, I mean, what's your response to people who feel your IJGB, I just got back status, complete with phone American accent, is a turn off for many? Do you think you can really connect with Nigerians at the grassroots, the market woman, the Okada rider?
Of course, nah.
How?
I tell people to say, so don't mind the packaging, shao. So the truth is, I'm an Aba boy. I was born in Owerri.
You don't look like Aba boy. I mean, you look like Aba boy.
I'll be correct, Aba boy. But no, I'm very in touch with, what it means to be Nigerian and being understanding the grassroots. So yeah. If you want more, switch to Pidgin. I feel switch to Pidgin, shao, and in fact, I went to Unilag for 2 years, so I understand Lagos. Well,
so what you're saying,
let's not go into the language. Yeah.
Is that when you're speaking to people that can blow English, you put on that accent, but when you get on the street, you switch like a chameleon and just go, all Pidgin.
It's adaptation, right? We're all humans, we do it, right? So the thing is, sometimes people say, well, you have to lose your, phone. I said, well, that's 16 years that I can't just throw away. In fact, that's the bulk of my adult life, right? But that does not mean that I cannot connect with the Nigerian or know that when you're buying something on the street, you don't give them money first. You collect change before you give them money, right? So we still remember.
Sharp guy.
Of course not.
You really grew up in Aba. And finally,
yeah.
If you indeed became the #1 man in Nigeria in 2019, who will be the #1 woman?
How about you find out then?
You have to give me an answer, because Nigerians are going to say, he cannot even lead a family, he wants to lead a nation. So is there someone?
And then you ask them, all the people that have led families, how well have they done leading the nation?
So are you single and searching?
I'm single. Was searching before I'm embarking on this. I think right now is more about people trying to search you out. But, single and kind of searching, because of course you have to understand the focus is making sure we win.
So you're looking for like your Michelle to support you when you become President Obama kind of thing?
Well, if you go that way, I like to say I'm looking for Chike's, You
heard it here.
Yes.
You're single and searching, slide into the DM.
Slide in, no.
And also come with your money, because he needs money to run his campaign.
If your father is a billionaire, reach out too.
I won't call billionaires' names, but we'll be going for a quick breather on Politico Politica. Please stay tuned.
Politico Politica Politics for everyone.
Before the break, Chike opened up to us about his political journey. But now on our Project Nigeria segment, he'll be sharing with us his plans for the nation. So I want you to see Nigeria as a project. How will you go about taking Nigeria from where it is now to the promised land? Let's start with your views on the fourth revolution.
So it's important to explain what the fourth industrial revolution is, right? So the world has been through three. You had steam. Steam gave us rail lines and, of course, the ability to transport goods and resources. You had electricity and scientific research, which ushered in power. You've had the digital age, which we're currently in. And of course, the fourth one is artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things and all that, right?
Augmented reality.
AR, VR, yeah, the future that we're walking into. And for me, in fact, that was a huge deciding factor in deciding to run, because I looked at the leaders we have now and realized these people don't understand anything about this, nor where we are headed, right? Especially, I tell people, as people of African descent, we tend to face more discrimination from other races. Now, when you add that to machine discrimination, which nobody seems to talk about, but the truth is people who are coding these machines are coding them with their biases. Now, if we're walking into a future as the largest, most populated continent with young people or workforce who are not prepared, who are ill-prepared, ill-trained, uneducated for that future, what sort of dystopian future are we walking into, right? So it's important that we have a nation that inspires young people inspires, and supports innovation, whether it's through tech hubs, through venture capital funds, through scientific and technological research, and sponsoring those, or bringing Africa together to understand the importance of investing in that collectively. So yeah, I think the fourth industrial revolution is something we should be extremely anxious about, one, but also excited about and investing in, yeah.
I like your answer because you already touched on some of my questions. So I'll just try to collapse some of them into one. I mean, we can't talk about a wealthy workforce if they're not healthy. And when it comes to the health statistics, Nigeria is doing very badly.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about maternal mortality, infant mortality,
Yep.
life expectancy,
Yep.
and then the youth. Where do we fit into this whole fourth industrial revolution? And definitely education, which is something that you're very passionate about. So I'm basically asking youth, education, and health.
Let's go back to my 4-point solution, right? So the way I tend to attack problems is you look at it holistically and try to come up with the right ways to solve problems. So for us, feed the people is one, and that's because we understand that it's like you can't give someone who's hungry a Bible and tell them to go and
stomach
repent.
infrastructure, basically.
Well, I hate to use that word because I think that's part of what has led us into where we are. But understanding the importance of making sure that we lift up 87 million people who live in abject poverty from where they are to a higher place, right? So, and what feeding the people also does for us is it helps us collect data. We're a nation of 200 million people without a centralized data system. That's part of the problem. You cannot provide health insurance for the populace. You cannot provide social infrastructure for the populace if you do not know your populace, right? So it's important that we take data, and feeding them becomes one way to garner the data that we need. Now, beyond that, the next step is investing in our well-being. And this is where education, health, security, environment, infrastructure, all of this is an investing in our well-being. And the reason why that's important is, just like you talked about, it's important to make sure we have a healthy populace, right? Nigerians spend over $1 billion every year on healthcare outside the nation. In fact, our president spends time outside getting healthcare, and that to him is not even an indictment to how poor of a job he's doing, if in no other sector in healthcare, right? So the question is, what do we need to do to make sure that our people have access to healthcare? Whether it's training primary healthcare providers in rural areas, because those are the people that people who live in these communities trust for lack of access to hospitals and all that. But there's making sure that we have urban care centers in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our local government areas that can provide that access to healthcare that the people need. But there's world-class hospital in every capital city across the country that becomes a feeding point for this urban healthcare systems, and making sure we have ambulatory care or emergency systems, 24-hour service that makes sure that people have access to healthcare. And then, of course, people say, well, it will be expensive. Yes, we need to make sure that we have a drug manufacturing sector as well as pharmaceuticals, because part of the reason why healthcare is expensive in Nigeria is medication, right? So if we have drug manufacturing plants and industries here that can, create generic medication that becomes affordable for the people, then it becomes a little easier for us to afford the medications that we need. So when we talk about security, once again, the holistic approach is important. When we look at our police force, we have just about 350,000 policemen guarding 200 million people. By UN standards, it should be 1 to, I think, 450 people, which means we need about 1.5 to 2 million policemen, which we definitely
So we need
don't
manpower.
have. We do. We need manpower. That's one. Two, we need to decentralize our police force and encourage more community and state policing.
So the vigilantes, the JTFs.
No, I would
the
not.
hunters.
No, not the vigilantes, right? So it's still a state-sponsored thing, wherein it's standardized across the nation, where people who decide to go into service or law enforcement are equipped and trained properly to understand the work they need to do, whether it's intelligence gathering, whether it's protecting the community. So it's vigilantes, some people come together and say, yeah, we jungle justice. No, not that. They're trained. They go to school, whether it's 6 months, whether it's 12 months, whether it's 18 months of training that qualifies you to understand what security means in your community. So we need to do that. We need to incentivize the people who protect us, right? I tell people we cry corruption, but the truth is some of the corruption that we have today is from survival, instincts.
Because you have mouths to feed.
Exactly, people trying to survive, right? So if we do that, if we equip them, now when
Foreign affairs?
I still had a lot to talk about in security and how to tackle insurgencies and all that. But okay, let's move to foreign affairs. Foreign affairs, China. I like to talk about China and what China is doing in Africa today. China pretty much owns Zambia, owns Ethiopia, owns Kenya, owns Tanzania. And this is because...
would you say they're on their way to owning Nigeria?
Nigeria actually has, I think Nigeria and Angola has the largest loan, whatever, from China. So yes, the one benefit we have is we have a large population, and a lot of resources. So we may have a little bit more buffer, leeway before it gets to that, but we're definitely headed that. So for instance, our president went to China a couple of weeks ago and took a soft loan for $328 million, right? Nobody knows what the money is for. You can be sure that if he does not make it in 2019, which we're hoping he doesn't, we will not know what would happen to that money. So I'm not against loan. I'm not against borrowing money, but it's making sure that there's right leadership to know how to use them.
And accountability and transparency.
Transparency is extremely important. So with foreign affairs, it's important to understand that, one, you have people who can advocate for the nation, right? So nation first, Nigeria first. What is in trade deals, diplomacy. Macron came here in June and claimed that he was putting up €1 billion to guarantee 70% of loans for startup founders. And our business leaders, hailed him, the Tony Elumelus, and then he kissed Buhari from cheek to cheek, and everybody said, yay, wonderful. But if you understand the consequences of that deal, you know that this was not in the best interest of the people. For one, you have to understand that startup founders do not have money, right? You do not give loans to startup founders. That's a trap, a disaster waiting to happen. You do investments, you do equity investments. Now, the benefit of equity investments is this. You understand that if the company folds up, you lose your money. Therefore, you do everything you can to make sure that they succeed. So someone like Macron would have to open Europe to Nigerian or African founders to scale their businesses to make sure they succeed, because that's the only way they benefit. The problem with loans, though, is this. Whether you succeed or fail, you have to pay
to pay it back. On Politico Politica is all about getting into the heart of politics. But when we return, I like to call it our quick fire segment. He has to respond the first thing that comes to mind. Hope it's the right answer. And yes, it's going to be absolute fun. You don't want to miss that. It's a quick fire segment. Whatever comes to mind is the right answer or wrong answer. Our viewers will decide.
Sure.
So, number one, the first female governor will emerge in the next elections. True or false?
True.
Number two, the party that will dominate in 2019 is
AAP.
Okay, very hopeful. Number three, young people have what it takes to be leaders because
we have everything we need to lead.
Number four, the funniest thing I've read about myself online
is that, young people should vote for me because if I mess up, they can beat me up.
Oh, really? That's not funny. That's mean.
That was hilarious.
Number five, the candidate I am most afraid of.
None.
Number six, Nigerians will vote with their stomach or their brain.
Both.
Number seven, if not you, who?
There's no plan B.
He wants it all the power. Thank you, Chike, for your honesty, your bravery, courage. You're a bit of an optimist. Let's hope your predictions, the prophet in you, really carries through to 2019. But
sure.
We'll see. The internet never forgets. We'll be wrapping up our very first episode of Politico Politica. But first of all, let's check out what's happening on the political landscape.
Politico Politica with Isabella Akinseye.
Chike, I know I've said this before, but thank you for being on the show. It's our very first episode of Politico Politica.
Sure.
And I mean, you've given really great answers. We wish you the best.
Thank you.
But I want you to take a deep breath. Can you do that for me? Yeah. So imagine that was your last breath.
Ooh.
And you had the ears of over 200 million Nigerians. What will you say to them? And you can say that to your camera.
We live in a nation of 200 million people, of which more than 60% are young people under the age of 30. The future is yours. The present is yours. We have been conditioned to believe that we're not good enough to lead, that we need to wait another 4 years before it's our time. And then in 4 years, it will be another 4 years. It will never be the right time. So here's what you have to remember. You have the power to change that which you want. You have the power. You are stronger. You're more vibrant. You outnumber the status quo. So it's extremely pertinent and important that you understand that potent power you have within you to change the course of our nation. And it starts now.
You must have been strapped up to an oxygen tank because that was more than one breath. But I mean, you didn't join them because I know if it's a typical Nigerian politician, it would just be like, vote for me in 2019. But hey, you reminded but you reminded people what's important and the power we have. And I think that's very in line with Politico Politica because we believe politics is for everyone. So thank you again for being on the show. We wish you the best. Feel free to come back when your president will come to Aso Rock and come and have fun. Right, crew?
Definitely.
Right, yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's been
Thank you very much. There you have it. What an interesting way to kick off season 1 and our very first episode with a young man full of ideas, full of vision. Reminds me of somebody, yeah. But yes, we young people have so much power in us. And still on October 1, still on Nigeria at 58, I'd like to close on an upbeat note. We are the future, we are the dream, we are the nation, we are part of this. We are at the heart of the nation changing history. But will history repeat itself? Or will we have a different kind of history come 2019? Is the future really here? Are we those future leaders that we've been told we are? Well, you'll have to join us on yet another episode of Politico Politica. My name is Isabella Akinseye, and I'm reminding you that politics is indeed for everyone. So play a part and stay woke.